It all started just a week ago. It's amazing how things can change in a week. It all began in Grenville, a city infamous for its shadows and secrets, where anything could be found, for the right price. You wandered those crooked, bustling streets, pockets light and stomach empty, searching for any chance to earn a coin. That's when you heard it, the voice of a bard, rich and beckoning, weaving songs of fortune and adventure beyond the seas, tales of Baramur, a land whispered to overflow with opportunity and gold. His words painted visions so vivid you could almost feel the weight of coin in your hands. You were sold on the dream. But dreams have a cost, and the fare to Baramur was far beyond anything you could afford. The bard saw the longing in your eyes and, with a knowing smile, leaned in. "Perhaps," he said, voice low and coaxing, "there's a way you might earn your passage. A little job, nothing too dangerous, if you're clever." The job was simple, at least on the surface. A merchant, known for his loose purse strings and even looser tongue, drank most nights away at a tavern called the Frog and Trumpet. Somewhere on his person, he kept a small, ornate box. Inside, an amulet the bard insisted was of great value. Your task, retrieve the box. Under no circumstances were you to open it. Despite the risks, you all agreed. The coin promised was too good to ignore. However, none among you were exactly of a rogue's persuasion. Picking pockets or slipping unseen through the crowd wasn't a natural talent. If you were going to succeed, you needed another way to separate the merchant from his precious trinket. Zenith, the warlock, always impatient, always eager, was keen to act immediately, his fingers twitching with eldritch energy at the thought of using a more direct method. Levo, the Harangon, quick-witted and nimble, also agreed, seeing opportunity in speed. But Tarak the Red, the brooding sorcerer, remained skeptical. Without a deft hand or silver tongue, he doubted how easily this plan could unfold. And if things went wrong, well, sorcery could solve many problems, but it rarely did so quietly. The night was young, the merchant was already deep in his cups, and the Frog and Trumpet bustled with noise and laughter. Levo the sorcerer was a relatively new addition to the group, having fallen in with Zenith and Tarak during a shared hunt for coin. Despite the brief acquaintance, Levo had felt strangely at ease in their company. These were not the crude, blood-stained warriors that roamed Grenville's underbelly. These were men of magic, thinkers, seekers of deeper power. Zenith and Tarak, in contrast, had been companions for many years. Their bond, forged through shared study and hardship, was a solid one. Together, they had pursued forgotten lore, forbidden spells, and the secrets of the unseen world. Levo, yearning for belonging among kindred spirits, found comfort in their quiet confidence. Perhaps it was that very bond, or simply the inevitability of the task ahead, that caused Tarak to relent at last. With a grudging sigh, he folded his arms and nodded. "So be it," he said. "Let's get this done." The plan was set in motion. The Frog and Trumpet roared with drunken laughter and clattering mugs as you made your approach. The merchant already slumped at a corner table, a bottle of something vile clutched lazily in his grasp. Somewhere on him was the box, the amulet, and all you had to do was take it without causing a scene. After a quick, whispered debate at a shadowed corner table, the plan was set. The merchant was too deep in his cups already. A little extra push and he'd be snoring into his mug. Zenith, always prepared for a little mischief, produced a small vial from the folds of his cloak. A mild sleeping draught purchased from a back-alley apothecary. "Harmless," he assured with a grin. "He'll wake up with nothing worse than a headache." Tarak kept watch while Levo, quick on his feet and not yet recognized by the merchant, offered to buy a round of drinks. The merchant, ever eager for free ale, accepted with a wide, sloppy smile. As Levo turned to the bar, Zenith deftly poured the draught into one of the mugs, giving it a slow swirl to mix. Within minutes, Levo returned, setting the poisoned drink in front of the merchant with a flourish. "To fortune!" Levo toasted. The merchant, none the wiser, downed it in 2 great gulps. You all watched with a mixture of tension and anticipation as his eyelids began to droop. He chuckled to himself, mumbled something about sea serpents and sweet deals, and then collapsed face first onto the table, snoring loudly. The tavern barely noticed. This wasn't exactly a rare sight of the Frog and Trumpet. Zenith moved fast. With practiced ease, he searched the merchant's body, locating a small, silver-inlaid box tucked into an inner pocket of the man's heavy coat, just as the bard had said. The box was cold to the touch, unnaturally so. You remembered the warning, do not open it. The night was cool, the streets of Grenville quiet save for the distant clatter of hooves and the occasional bark of a drunken brawl. You found a shadowed alley out of sight to catch your breath and inspect your prize. But the temptation was too much for Zenith. Ignoring Levo's sharp don't and Tarak's warning glare, Zenith cracked open the box. Inside, nestled against worn black velvet, were 3 plain silver rings, a small handful of glittering diamonds, and, at the very center, a pendant. The amulet was carved from some luminous white stone, smooth to the touch, shaped like a tear. It seemed to catch and hold even the dim alley light, gleaming softly. Levo leaned in, frowning. Beautiful, sure, he muttered, but doesn't look like it's worth half what the bard promised. But the diamonds, however, they sparkled like bottled starlight. Those alone could fund their trip across the sea 10 times over. Zenith, grinning like a child with a stolen sweet, plucked the amulet out of the box, holding it by its chain. "Go on," he said, nudging Tarak with an elbow. "Try it on. It'll cheer you up, old man." Tarak hesitated, suspicion flickering across his face. He knew enough about magic to be wary of enchanted items, especially ones hidden away so carefully. Still, the diamonds called to their need, the rings called to their curiosity, and the amulet, well, it seemed almost to whisper in the back of Tarak's mind. After much cajoling, teasing, and goading from Zenith, Tarak sighed heavily and snatched up the amulet. It felt strangely cold against his skin as he fastened the chain around his neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as Tarak idly flipped the smooth white stone over between his fingers, darkness swallowed him whole. Tarak's body crumpled to the ground with a hollow thud. His skin turned ashen, his chest unmoving. No breath, no life. Levo stepped back in horror, heart hammering. Zenith froze, blood draining from his face. Then, before their very eyes, a shape began to form above Tarak's body. It was Tarak, or what was left of him. A ghostly form, translucent and shimmering in the dim alley light, standing as if nothing were wrong. His face bore an easy, almost excited grin. Zenith nearly screamed, barely choking it back when he realized it was still his friend. Somehow. "Wow," Tarak said, inspecting his hands with wide eyes. "It's some kind of invisibility amulet. Look at this." Before either of the others could respond, Tarak flipped the amulet over again and his body, or something resembling it, solidified. He stood there, seemingly whole, seemingly alive, laughing even. But Levo and Zenith saw what Tarak could not. A slight transparency still clung to his form, a wrongness in the way he moved, as if he was just barely tethered to this world. Tarak had died, and now he was something else, a ghost wearing his own skin. Zenith swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. This was his fault. And something told them all that the amulet's price had only just begun to reveal itself. Zenith stumbled around the corner, heart pounding, desperate for a moment to breathe. The night air was cold and sharp, but it did little to clear the terror knotting his stomach. Tarak, his friend, was dead, and it was his fault. He pressed his back against the wall, trying to think, trying to plan. That's when the bard appeared. No footsteps, no warning, just there, stepping from the shadows as if the darkness itself had birthed him. He wore the same crooked smile, but now it twisted with amusement, almost mocking. "You opened the box, didn't you?" the bard said, voice low and oily, a chuckle rumbling from his chest. Before Zenith could speak, before he could even move, the bard began to change. His skin darkened and cracked, horns curling from his forehead. His fine clothes shredded into tattered robes that seemed to drip shadow. His eyes burned like coals. A fiend stood before him. Zenith stared, frozen, words caught in his throat. The creature grinned wider, baring sharp, glistening teeth. "The rings," he said, gesturing lazily toward the silver bands still resting in the velvet-lined box, "will protect you from your ghostly friend." His gaze burned into Zenith's soul. "And here," the fiend added, tossing a thick envelope onto the ground at Zenith's feet, "is your ticket to Baramur, just as promised." The fiend laughed, a sound like cracking bone, and faded back into the shadows, leaving only the faint scent of ash and brimstone behind. Zenith, trembling, stooped to pick up the envelope. Inside, 3 ferry passes, sealed with the crest of the merchant houses of Grenville. Instructions to board at dawn. And a blood-red wax seal stamped with a symbol none of them recognized. Their path to Baramur was clear, but at what cost? And behind him, back in the alley, Tarak stirred restlessly, his form still flickering at the edges of sight. They sailed across the Baramur Sea beneath grey skies and colder winds. The Worm's wake groaned with every wave, and the crew, silent, watchful, kept mostly to themselves. The 3 passengers, too, remained below deck, tucked into a dark corner of the hold between crates and coils of rope. No songs, no firelight, only whispered words and sleepless nights. Levo scavenged what food he could, living off stale bread and dried fish, curling up like a stray dog when rest came. Tarak, ever the scholar, studied the amulet obsessively, now convinced it was some kind of planar artifact. He seemed lighter, happier, maybe even more alive than before. Zenith found it unnerving. It was Zenith who finally broke the silence. He pulled out one of the silver rings. It glimmered faintly in the low light, pulsing with an energy he recognized almost. It was right there on the edge of memory. He turned it over, eyes narrowing. "These aren't cursed," he whispered. "They feel right, good, protective." He slipped the ring onto his finger. At that very moment, Levo stirred from his makeshift bed in the corner, eyes wide. "No, don't!" he cried, lunging forward. Too late. The ring settled on Zenith's hand, and warmth flowed through him. Not just warmth, calm. For the first time since the alley, since Tarak's collapse, the gnawing fear vanished. He looked up at Tarak, who was fiddling cheerfully with the amulet and chatting idly about ley lines and soul structures. Zenith smiled, the first time since it had happened. Tarak looked so happy, like the old days. Levo stared at him, horrified. "What did you do that for?" he demanded. Zenith turned to him, voice steady, clearer than it had been in days. "I needed to know," he said simply. And deep down, he already knew. The Fiend hadn't lied. Strange things began to happen aboard the Worm's wake. It started small, the crew murmuring about shimmering shapes glimpsed at night, footsteps echoing on the deck when no one was there. Cold spots crept through the hull like tendrils of mist. Then someone claimed to see a figure, translucent, tall, silent, walking along the bow, staring out to sea. Whispers grew. The crew grew uneasy. The first mate began sleeping with a dagger under his pillow. Even the rats, once bold and curious, vanished from the hold. Captain Darren, a God-fearing man with salt-bleached hands and prayers tattooed down his arms, had seen enough. To his mind, it was obvious the new passengers were the source of this trouble. Magic, and not the harmless kind, clung to them like oil to water. When the ship neared a rocky outcropping where the sea met the mountains, a seldom-used landing below the jagged cliffs of the Dilamir's spine, known as the turning point of the Grey Coast, the captain made his decision. They were getting off. He met them at dawn, standing at the top of the gangplank with half the crew behind him, each man holding something blunt or sharp. Oars, gaff hooks, axes. None were brave enough to step forward, but they stood in a line, grim and nervous. The captain cleared his throat and tried to keep the tremor from his voice. "Get off, will ya? You're not welcome on my boat anymore." His tone was firm, but not cruel, just afraid. The wind howled across the mountain cliffs. The sea slammed into the black rocks far below. The harbour was little more than a narrow stone jetty lashed together by ancient ropes. No town, one road, cliffs, wind, and a dense forest. Zenith, Levo, and Tarak stood in silence. The narrow coastal path curved inland, winding between crumbling stone outcrops and thorn-choked underbrush. After hours of silent trekking, the land shifted, trees thickened, shadows deepened, and the sea's roar became a whisper behind them. The forest was dense, damp, and old. Though the trail still existed, it was barely more than a suggestion, overgrown and scattered with debris. But someone had passed this way not long ago. Up ahead, nestled in a shallow rise, stood the remains of an old toll gate, half collapsed and strangled by ivy. The wooden barrier had long since rotted, its iron fittings rusted through. Just beyond the broken archway, 2 bodies lay sprawled in the dirt. Adventurers. One was clearly dead, neck twisted at an unnatural angle, face frozen in a final moment of pain. The other stirred. He raised a trembling hand and croaked out a word, too broken to understand. "Could be a trap," Levo muttered, hand already on the hilt of his dagger. Zenith narrowed his eyes, stepping forward slowly, while Tarak stayed behind, watching the shadows. Then the man slumped forward, completely still. Something rolled from his limp fingers, bouncing once on the cracked stones before coming to a stop. It was a scroll in a beautiful leather case. Zenith, seeing it was not magical, passed it to Levo. Levo graciously read it aloud. Duke Marshal Wilmot III, ruler of Baramur, had heard tales of a renowned witcher for hire named Gerrit of Baramur and his faithful friend Forgotso the Bard. These tales reached him through his old friend Queen Meve of Lyria, who spoke highly of Gerrit's many accomplishments. Intrigued and hopeful, the Duke requested Gerrit and Forgotso's presence at the royal court, seeking their unique skills to assist his mage Nimin Cloudmantle in a critical quest. Nimin had uncovered new information about an ancient artifact that once belonged to Bundoor, the first ruler of Baramur. Bundoor, known for his distrustful nature, had demanded that the artifact be buried with him, believing that no one else should possess its power. The exact location of his grave had been lost to time. Recent discoveries by Nimin, however, hinted at clues that could finally reveal the grave's location. With the artifact rumoured to hold immense power and historical significance, finding it was of utmost importance. Upon receiving the Duke's summons, travel to Kotsmere and meet with Nimin at the Nikadrani's tavern. While Zenith was listening, he knelt beside the fallen man, fingers deftly searching his cloak belt for anything of use, coin, a blade, a clue. The forest had gone quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it, a low, guttural rumble, not from the trees, but from the shadows between them. A snarl. Zenith froze. Wolves, he whispered, eyes narrowing. Levo stepped back, hands already glowing faintly with arcane light. Tarak tensed, clutching the amulet around his neck. From around the corner of the road, shapes emerged, low to the ground, eyes glinting like embers. The forest wolves lunged from the underbrush, twisted bodies low, jaws wide, the stench of rotten damp earth rushing in with them. Tarak reacted first. With a whispered word, his fingertips glowed a cold, spectral blue. He flicked his wrist, and a ghostly skeletal hand spiraled outward, chill touch, gripping the hind leg of one wolf mid-sprint. The creature stumbled, snarling as frost crackled over its haunch. Zenith followed. His hand shot forward, and a crackling bolt of eldritch energy ripped from his palm, slamming into the lead wolf's chest. It yelped mid-leap and crashed sideways into a dead log, smoking. Levo didn't hesitate. He conjured a sharp spike of psychic energy, mind sliver, and drove it into the staggering beast's thoughts. As it reeled, Zenith buried his notched axe in its skull, twisting the blade as he went down with it. The fight was over in moments. Steam rose from the corpses, blood seeped into the loam. Silence returned, broken only by their breaths, quick, sharp, disbelieving. Their first fight together, and they had survived. Zenith stood over one of the beasts, the smoking mark of his blast still glowing on its hide. He pulled his axe free with a grunt and looked at the others. Tarak looked at his own hands, surprised at how steady they were. Levo, mind racing, searched for more, but the battle was over. They pressed on through the dense woodland, the sun arcing high before dipping westward. The land sloped gently down, the sound of water growing louder with each step. By late afternoon, they reached a wooden bridge spanning the raging river, its current fast churning and brown with spring melt. There, standing on the bridge with short legs and a faraway look, sat a halfling in dented armor. A chipped longsword rested across his lap, and beside him lay a broken pack and an empty water skin. He looked up as they approached. Don't suppose you've seen a band of adventurers, one dwarf, two elves, and a gnome wizard who thought himself a tactician? Tarak gave a knowing frown. Sounds like they might have found the same wolves we did. The halfling sighed. Yeah, thought as much. He introduced himself as Pimim, a ferocious fighter. More heart than strategy, more luck than plan. His party had gone ahead, scouting for a shortcut. That was 2 days ago. Now he was low on rations and direction, but not on courage. It didn't take much for Tarak to persuade him to join their company. Safety in numbers, Tarak said. And drinks in numbers too, Pimim replied with a hopeful grin. So the group became 4, and together they continued their journey toward Nikadrani's tavern, the scroll tucked safely in Levo's pack and the road winding ever onward.